My name is Mary Parks.
I'm Emily.
My name's Jared.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Sean.
And we have identified disability as our problem as its treatment within education needs to be changed.
So we started our research by trying to define what disability is. The first two definitions we gathered from our classmates. The first person said a disability is an attribute of a person that prevents them from experiencing everything. The next peer said a disadvantage to a person's skill set compared to the average person. From this, we then went to an online source and found that the ADA defined a person with disability as a person with a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. So from these three definitions, we concluded that the definition of disability is a little ambiguous and it kind of differs depending on what context you are trying to define it in and who you're trying to speak to. So from this, as a group, we began to discuss our own personal experiences with disability in school. While reflecting on this, I remembered how different disabilities were treated differently in our school system. So when I was in the 5th grade, I failed my vision test and my best friend April failed her hearing test. While that meant that I had to get glasses and she had to get a hearing aid, there was a lot of different emphasis put on this adjustment period where I just got a pair of glasses and was told to go back to school, but she had to get a hearing aid and people kept checking in on her to make sure she wasn't bullied, and it just kind of shows how in a school system disabilities are shown differently. Not only are you segregated from other students, but you're also segregated from different disabilities.
Within my educational experience, I noticed that people with disabilities often had a segregated environment where those with disabilities were often separated from the other students, which didn't necessarily give them an equal or fair chance to learn the same material at the same rate, even though they were able to do the material with the other students.
I noticed in my school setting that despite all the advancements in recent years towards equality, that there was still a prejudice against the disabled students, such as people would make jokes about being on the short bus, which is the bus that all those students would take to school, and they'd call each other the R word and things like that.
In a different perspective, my school, I think, practiced a better technique with helping these students that have a disability. They better prepare them for their future by drawing on the students' strengths and preparing them to go into the work field and actually support themselves after school. So the students ran a little coffee shop in the mornings where they would learn how to work with each other, interact with different peers, run a cash register, and things like that, so that they were becoming more prepared to have a successful life after school.
Okay, so the issue is not necessarily the person themselves, it's the world around them. There's many different issues that someone with disabilities may face besides just the social prejudices. There's also the physical barriers, such as not being able to get upstairs when you are on a wheelchair. Things may be too small a font or too quiet so that you can't read it if you have vision problems, or if you're not the best at hearing, you might not be able to hear. And because of all these prejudices and physical barriers, it causes a greater chance of you not being able to find a job or succeed in the world just because people view you differently.
So after defining our disabilities and pinpointing where the problems arise in education, we then looked over the course of history of treatment, and we could see that it has definitely evolved since the 1930s. So before the 1930s, people were viewed as defective, and they weren't really treated like human beings at all, and most people were then abandoned by their own families. And in 1935, Alexis Carrel published a book called Man the Unknown, which was kind of the first major book published that advocated that we remove the mentally ill by euthanasia. So in the World War II time period from 1939 to 1945, Adolf Hitler ordered all mentally ill people to be killed. Following World War II, in 1956, 559,000 patients were recorded across America suffering from neglect and abuse in the mental hospital. This is kind of where we can see a turning point in the treatment for disabled. As people were returning from war, a lot of reforms were taking place in America, especially around disability. And in 1975, the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Disabled was passed. Following this, by 1996, rights for the disabled were becoming widespread across the globe, and many countries had rights for the disabled being passed left and right. So this is this is recent in the large picture of the history to present day, which is kind of why the definition of disability is still evolving.
Okay, so just to show some data that represents how broad of an issue this is within the education system, between 2015 to 2016, about 34% of all students receiving special education services had specific learning disabilities. 20% had speech or language impairments, and 14% had other health impairments. Between 2011, 2012, and 2015 to 2016, the number of students served increased from 6.4 million to 6.7 million, while the percentage served remained at 13% of total public school enrollment. So that just shows that the rise of students that are diagnosed with a disability keeps increasing over time. However, schools are not adjusting for that increase, and they're not providing as much services and drawing on students' strengths to help them succeed.
So then we connected our problem back to education and democracy. And we initially stated that in order for democracy to function well, everyone needs to be educated. And by everyone, this means that we have to have equal rights for the disabled. And that everyone, even though you're disabled, you deserve an equal opportunity in democracy in order to have a high-functioning society.
Okay, so there's two major models of disability. The one that used to be more common but has become less common is the medical model of disability. This basically says it identifies a issue in the person and then goes ahead and tries to fix it. Now this is a problem as some people don't see their disability as something that needs fixed. For example, like the medical model says that those with hearing impairments need to get implant, but they might not want that implant. And the problem with this is if you're viewing them as defective, it's going to lead to prejudice and discrimination, and that hatred and dislike towards those groups eventually grew into the eugenics movement way back when, which was trying to perfect the human race by only allowing the good ones to breed instead of letting everyone have equal opportunity. I saw the medical model when dealing with my brother, as he has severe ADHD and dysgraphia, and basically doctors would just try to fix him by giving medication after medication, despite these meds making him look very sick and very underweight, and his hair was falling out. They just thought that he was an issue that needed to be fixed. But recently they've made some changes, and he's doing a lot better. The other model is the social model, which instead of viewing the person as having an issue, it's saying that disability is a social construct. It seeks to change society to accommodate people living with impairment, but does not seek to change the person. So it's saying that people with a disability should be treated as fully equal citizens.
Okay, so the social model is what we believe should exist in schools, and what happened is that the schools would focus on the students' strengths and how educators can use those to help the students succeed and have good advantage. So for example, a student with ADHD, as suggested by a video that we had seen in class, they achieve success when they share a particular interest in a topic. So rather than labeling them of having a disability, they should view these students as having a difference in cognition. So an example of that would be if a student is trying to learn how to read, but they have ADHD and they just can't focus, if they have a particular interest in cars, by providing them readings about cars, they would have more of an interest and be better at following the directions and reading the assignment and succeeding. So people with a disability are seen as being disabled not by their impairment, but by society's failure to take their needs into account. So another way that this would be practiced in a school is by inclusion. So instead of separating a student and making them feel isolated and all in the classroom, they would be included, be with their peers of general education courses and things like that. So the teachers are drawing on their strengths rather than making the students move to a different environment and have to learn in a different setting. So an application of the social model in schools would also be having a positive attitude and not underestimating students. So again, that would be drawing on their strengths and not just looking at their weaknesses and how the students can change those. So, and then there'd be more of an education of disability, but like we previously mentioned, it's the students' abilities, not what they're unable to do. And making buildings more accessible, so that would be providing ramps at more convenient spaces rather than students having to go out of their way instead of their regular peers who just get to walk up the stairs at the front of the building. And then other ways that this could happen is including Braille and different classroom signs, large fonts, providing audio recordings of lessons to students, and et cetera, for students who are impaired by blindness or deafness. And then this would also include educating more people about sign language. The language of sign is very popular among individuals who are deaf, and they treat it as more of a cultural thing. So by making that more widespread, that would create more of a social model, and not just to schools, but also society.
So after we established that we agree with the social method, we then decided to look in America to see what rights we have already established for those who are disabled. We found that there are 3 prominent laws and these include the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So the Americans with Disability Act of 1990 states is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in schools, workplaces, and public spaces. Then, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability at schools that receive federal funding. And finally, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is an education law that requires schools to provide special education and related services to kids with disabilities who need them. Additionally, this law mandates that children and youth ages 3 to 21 with disabilities be provided a free and appropriate public school education.
Okay, so one way we see the social model on campus is a program called DCAP, which stands for the Dub C Autism Awareness, and their mission is to build an inclusive and accepting campus to better support the experience and the needs of students with autism. So that means getting the students out and involved and making social interactions with others. So why would a student go into DCAP? It would give them a place to belong. They would be able to come and have a place to meet other students with the autism spectrum disorders. They'd be in a judgmental-free environment with people that are specially trained to deal with their needs, and they can ask questions and learn how to better fit in socially if they so desire. Another way is to learn functional, independent, and adult living skills, such as knowing how to organize things and how to live on their own for the first time, since many of them are away from their families and living on a college campus. Another way is to learn professional skills, such as they help them find jobs, job building, and get them employment opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. So some of the resources they have are these social hangouts that they do, where they bring both students on the spectrum and students not on the spectrum to just come together, play games, and watch TV and just have a good time. There's also quiet study spaces for them to be able to focus, because oftentimes people on the spectrum just get distracted by things around them. So having a good quiet place to study really helps them succeed academically. There's also career prep, such as doing job searches, and assisting with the application process. They might have some people come in and do mock interviews with them, and they also teach them to self-advocate, so they know where they're aware of how they're acting, and they're accessing resources for them.
So along with DCAP, another on-campus program is RAM Initiative. And RAM Initiative is a program at Westchester University that promotes the admission of a small number of individuals with disability to participate in a 2-year post-secondary education. With this program, it's very inclusive, as these individuals will be able to learn, live, and socialize with other students on campus without restriction. And they also get full privileges of the university, and they have no segregated environments. That relates back to what I said earlier about within my own educational experience, where in high school, students were sectionalized and in segregated environments. Westchester University helps to limit the segregated environments by putting students in with other college students and realizing their true potential and full ability.
When researching a topic as significant as this one, it is important to talk to someone with experience in this field who can provide first-hand knowledge on the subject. My father is a Westchester University graduate and taught students with disabilities for 12 years. During his time in education, he worked at 3 different schools for those with special needs, including the Devereaux School here in Westchester, Wood Services in Langhorne, PA, and the Delta School in Philadelphia. During his time as a teacher, my father worked with students with a wide array of disabilities ranging from mild to severe. Some of these disabilities included autism, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, and ADHD. As a special education teacher, my father provided his students with social, emotional, and academic support, along with the responsibility of making sure that his students were cared for physically. While interviewing him about the topic of this presentation, my father provided me with a few interesting quotes about what he learned from teaching in special education. Firstly, he said, "It is important to treat students with disabilities like normal kids. It is much easier to earn a student's trust when you treat them equally and fairly. Earning a student's trust is especially important when they have a disability, as it makes them feel more comfortable in the classroom." Another lesson he learned was that it is important not to feel sorry for the students. Every student is unique and has special talents and gifts. Students with disabilities are not in school to receive sympathy. They are there to learn and to grow. So it is important to treat them as what they are, learners. Finally, my father emphasized that the students he worked with were amazing, as they were able to make the most of their abilities, despite their disabilities. He says some of the greatest and strongest individuals were his students, which he taught throughout his 12 years as an educator. The relationships he made with them has shaped the person he is today, which is why it is so critical that special education is given top priority, not only in this country, but in the world as well. Our solution to the mistreatment of disabled individuals in education is to apply social model to education universally, treat students with disabilities as equals and include them in a non-restrictive school setting, provide funding toward eliminating physical barriers, make resources available such as quiet study sessions, large print books, personal instructors, spread the word to end the word, focus on students' talents and interests, and create programs similar to those that we talked about today.
Okay, so as my major here at Westchester University, I'm a special education major, which means that I have been placed in different schools around the area that I'm working with students with disabilities. So I've sort of seen firsthand how the social model versus the medical model has been in practice. And one particular student that I've been working with has many different disabilities that have gone undiagnosed, and he has not been evaluated in almost 8 years. And now he's a junior and not on track to graduate on time. So the school had been practicing more of the medical model by saying that that student needs to adjust more. They need to go to a different environment, different school, and have all these different teachers that are trying to adjust the way that the student is learning rather than drawing on his strengths. So now the teachers are beginning to take more of an initiative and going through the district and trying to get the student the extra support and resources that they need so that they will be able to now succeed in school and eventually graduate to move on to a different career path and go to college.
Okay, so we think that the social model is the best solution as it empowers the students and individuals and allows them to see an education. It also acts against any discrimination they might face. So we found a short little video from people that are living with disabilities, and they basically say why they personally like the social model.
I always felt being a disabled person was a problem. After learning about social model, it challenged me to look at disability completely differently. I myself was able to gain some confidence and self-esteem.
Social model basically says we are people with impairments, and those impairments clearly have an impact on how we live our lives. But the impairments are not things which disable us.
I'm disabled by the world around me, and if the world was more accessible, I would be less disabled, and then I would just be left with my impairment, i.e. what doesn't work. It's not that my legs don't work that's disabling me, it's the fact that if I want to, if I'm on a flat surface, I can wheel around fine, I'm wonderfully happy. It's only when I come up a flight of stairs.
As a wheelchair user, you have a slightly easier job of explaining the social model. Whereas if you're trying to explain the less physical barriers, it's much harder.
There's barriers everywhere in life to do with how we communicate, to do with people's attitudes.
Discovering the social model actually was a massive liberation on another level. Yeah, I was being treated differently, and no, it wasn't me being deficient, it was everybody else's social anxieties that were being projected onto me.
The blame for you not fitting in, it's no longer on your shoulders.
Suddenly, my disability is out there and not in here. It was what made me realise that I was something beyond the thing that other people thought I was.
It's a real liberating thing, but it also means you can change it. We can say to the world, look, you must put a lift in this building. You must make sure that the signage is readable for people with visual impairment.
If you want that equality to be real, you've really got to then tackle the inequality people are experiencing in schools, in workplaces, with transport.
The main reason that the social model, I think, is important to disabled people is that it allows us to be a community. You achieve a whole lot more as a group.
As long as we, as disabled people, make sure that our voices are heard, and that all those people that support us also have their voices heard, I think we will get there.
I hope that Scope is doing work that will help disabled people to become prouder of who we are, pushing boundaries around who can be included and where.
Come the glorious day, if it ever came, where all the barriers went, you know, we just be people with impairments. We wouldn't be disabled people anymore.
Find out more about Scope's work and how to get involved.
So in conclusion, as a group, we have identified the educational treatment of those classified with disability to be an issue. While the medical model was abundant, societal infrastructure has begun to shift to a more social model, especially within education. The social model helps to ensure all individuals are given equal opportunity to achieve their goals through the aforementioned applications of the social model. An example of this is individuals with ADHD in the educational system having a difference in cognition as opposed to a disability. Examples of progressive treatment of disability in the social model include, as we mentioned, DCAP, RAM Initiative, and then Sean's perspective of a special ed teacher. Thus, while our solution entails numerous enhancements to the treatment of the disability, the adaptation of the social model is a large component for social and educational change.
Yay, source